The wind howled through the valley like a wild beast, trees bent and cracked, their branches flying through the dark sky. Thunder rolled across the hills, and rain poured like sheets of ice. It was not a normal storm. It was something fierce, something angry, something unnatural. Jackson sat in his small cabin at the edge of the alien village. He was the only human living among them. A quiet man with a strong back and a kind heart. He had come to this world 3 years ago, looking for peace. But peace was far away tonight. Lightning flashed. And then came a sound that froze Jackson's blood. A scream, high and sharp, echoing through the storm. Then came shouts in a strange alien language. He grabbed his coat and ran out into the rain. Villagers were running toward the river. Lights floated in their hands. Glowing orbs used in the dark. Jackson followed them, his boots sinking in the mud. As he reached the riverbank, he saw chaos. The river was a wild monster, swollen with rain. It roared and crashed against the rocks. Children cried, elders shouted. One woman dropped to her knees, sobbing. Someone screamed. She fell in. She fell in. Jackson looked at the water, searching. Then he saw Herge for a second, a small shape, arms waving, eyes wide with fear. An alien girl, no older than 7. Her skin was pale blue, her hair silver and wet. She was slipping under, pulled by the current, without thinking. Jackson threw off his coat and boots. He tied a rope around his waist and handed it to the nearest man. "Hold it tight," he shouted. The man hesitated, but nodded. Jackson ran toward the edge and dove in. The water hit him like a wall. It was cold, fast, and full of hidden rocks. He swam hard, pushing against the current. Rain hit his face, blinding him. He saw her again. Floating further away, he kicked harder, his arms slicing through the water. Every second counted. He reached her just as she slipped under again. He grabbed her and pulled her close. She wasn't moving. Her body was cold, her eyes closed. Jackson turned and swam back, holding her above the surface. The current fought him, pulling at his legs. Rocks scraped his arms, but he didn't let go. He pushed forward, stroke after stroke. The rope went tight, and the villagers began to pull. Hands grabbed him, pulling him and the girl onto the muddy shore. Jackson collapsed, gasping for breath. The girl lay still beside him. Her lips were blue, her chest not rising. The crowd fell silent. The mother screamed, crawling to her daughter. Jackson sat up and moved toward the girl. He pressed his hands on her chest and began to push. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. Nothing. The mother sobbed louder. Her mate held her close. Jackson didn't stop. Again. 1, 2, 3. Breathe. Suddenly, the girl coughed. Then again, harder this time. Water came from her mouth, and she gasped for air. The crowd gasped too. Then they cheered. Tears ran down the mother's face as she pulled her daughter into her arms. The father, a tall alien with golden eyes, looked at Jackson. His eyes were wide not with fear but with awe. "You saved her," he said softly. "You are the answer to our prayer." Jackson shook his head, still catching his breath. "I just did what anyone should do," he replied. But the villagers were already whispering. They called him the river-touched. They said no one had ever survived that water. They said he was marked by the stars. Jackson looked down at his arms. Blood mixed with water. Scratches from rocks covered his skin, but he was alive, and so was the girl, that night. As the storm died down and the river calmed, Jackson returned to his cabin. He dried off, lit a fire, and stared into the flames. He didn't want thanks, or gifts, or titles. He only wanted the girl to live. But as he closed his eyes to rest, he felt something strange. A cold wind passed through the room. When he opened his eyes, There was a mark on his door, a glowing symbol shaped like water. And flamed together. He stepped outside, heart beating fast, but there was no one there. Only silence. Jackson touched the mark, and it pulsed with heat. Something had changed. The storm had ended, but this was only the beginning. The storm had passed, but the village was still shaking. Trees had fallen, water flooded the paths, and lights flickered in the dark, but no one cared about the damage right now. All eyes were on the small alien girl who lay wrapped in her mother's arms. She was alive, breathing, and slowly opening her silver eyes. Jackson stood nearby, dripping. Wet mud on his face and arms, his body ached. But his heart felt light. He had saved her. That was enough, or so he thought. The girl's mother looked at Jackson and whispered a word in her own tongue. "Virali," she said, her voice trembling. An elder stepped forward, his eyes wide. "You know what you've done, human?" the elder said. Jackson blinked, confused. "I just saved a child." The elder knelt in front of Jackson and touched his muddy foot. "That child is not just any child," he said slowly. "She is Miari, daughter of the seer and the general." Jackson looked toward the girl again. Her father stood beside her now, tall, silent, his eyes filled with something deep. The villagers formed a circle around them. Some knelt. Some placed their hands over their hearts. Jackson felt awkward, unsure what to say. "I don't need this," he muttered. "I just did what I could," but the elder was shaking his head. "No one has survived the Death River in 100 years. Ah," he said. "It is cursed. It pulls in the living and returns only bones. But you dove in. And not only lived, you brought someone out. You are chosen." "Chosen," Jackson repeated, frowning. "By who?" The elder pointed up to the stars. "By them," he said. "By the ones who watch." Jackson opened his mouth to argue, but a hush fell over the crowd. The girl Miari was standing. She walked slowly to Jackson, her small hand reaching out. Her lips parted, and in a soft voice, she said, "Thank you." Jackson knelt down to her level. Surprised, she spoke in English. "You're welcome," he said gently. She leaned forward and kissed his cheek. A warm pulse spread through his skin, and the villagers gasped. The elder whispered, "The mark has been given." Jackson stood and stepped back. "What mark?" But the people were already moving. Some ran to fetch flowers, others lit lanterns. It was no longer a rescue, it had become a celebration. Later that night, Jackson returned to his cabin. He cleaned his wounds, made tea, and tried to understand what was happening. He didn't believe in magic or destiny or being chosen. But something strange was going on. He touched the side of his cheek where Miari kissed him. It was still warm, and the skin there glowed slightly in the dark. A soft knock came at his door. He opened it and found the girl's parents standing there. Her father, the general, bowed low, and her mother held a plate of glowing fruit. "We offer this as thanks," she said. Jackson waved it off. "I don't need anything." The general spoke, his voice deep and steady. "You may not need it. But we owe you more than thanks. You saved our only child." Jackson looked down, unsure how to respond. The general continued, "Our people. We do not forget. We pray to those who save life. And you have saved the life of a seer's daughter. We will build a shrine in your name." Jackson's eyes widened. "No, no shrine," he said quickly. "I don't want to be worshipped." "I'm just a man," the general finished, nodding. "But a man who did the impossible." The mother stepped forward and placed the fruit on his table. "If not a shrine, then at least accept this gift," she said softly. She looked at him closely. "You were sent to us for a reason." "I believe that now." As they left, Jackson sat alone with the glowing fruit. He sighed and leaned back. "Sent. Here for a reason," he repeated to himself. He looked at the soft light glowing under his skin. Maybe, just maybe, there was something more going on, Later that night, Jackson lay in bed, unable to sleep. He stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in his head: the girl's face in the river, the kiss on the cheek, the mark on his door, and the word Virali. His thoughts were broken by the soft sound of bells outside. He rose and peeked through the window. A line of villagers walked by, holding candles and singing softly. At the front of the line was Mayari, dressed in white, holding a glowing flower. She stopped in front of Jackson's door, placed the flower on his steps, then bowed deeply. Her mother and father joined her, and so did the elder. They whispered something, too soft for him to hear, then turned and walked away into the night. Jackson stood silently, staring at the flower. Its petals glowed softly, the same color as the light under his skin. He picked it up, and as he did, he heard a whisper in the wind, a voice that said, "You are more than you know." Jackson looked at the stars, and for the first time since he arrived on this world, he wondered if the people were right. Maybe. He was chosen. Morning came quietly. The storm was gone. The sun peeked over the hills, and the air smelled fresh. Birds chirped softly, and mist floated above the trees. But something in the village had changed. Something deep and quiet, like a drumbeat beneath the earth. Jackson stepped out of his cabin, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The strange glowing mark on his cheek was gone, but he still felt its warmth. He looked down and saw the flower Mayari had left on his steps. Its glow had faded, but the petals still shimmered with strange color. He picked it up gently and placed it on his table. As he drank his tea, a sound echoed outside, chants, soft and slow. Rising from many voices, he opened his door again and saw something that made him freeze. The entire village was walking toward him in silence. Old and young, warriors and healers, even the animals watched from a distance. In front of them walked the elder, dressed in white, holding a long wooden staff. Behind him, Mayari and her parents walked with calm faces. Heads lowered, Jackson stepped aside as they came to his door. The elder raised his staff and drew a symbol. In the air, it glowed for a moment, then faded. He turned to the crowd and spoke in a loud voice. "Brothers and sisters, he has the mark." He faced the cursed river and returned with life. He was kissed by the daughter of the seer. He is the waterborn. The villagers dropped to one knee. Bowing their heads, Jackson raised his hands, confused and embarrassed. "Please, I'm not a god. I'm just a man." The elder turned to him with kind eyes. "You may see yourself as a man," he said, "but the signs say otherwise." Jackson shook his head. "Signs can be wrong." Mayari stepped forward, her silver eyes staring into his. "I saw you before the storm," she whispered, "in my dreams. I saw you standing in fire and water, holding me. You were glowing. Just like now." Jackson stared at her, heart thumping. "Dreams don't mean anything," he said, unsure of his own words, but the crowd believed, and belief can change everything. The elder nodded once, then pointed to the sky. "Tonight, the stars will decide. You will go through the trial of the blessed." "The what?" Jackson asked, confused. "It is a test." The elder said, "Only the chosen can pass it. If you are who we believe you are, the trial will accept you. If not," he paused, "you will return to your cabin, and we will ask no more of you." Jackson didn't like the sound of it, but something inside him said yes. Maybe it was the girl's dream, maybe it was the glow in his skin, or maybe he just wanted to understand. That night, under a sky full of stars, Jackson walked with the villagers to the sacred hill. It was silent, except for the sound of soft bells. At the top stood a ring of stones, glowing faintly with old energy in the center of the stones. A shallow pool reflected the moonlight. The elder stood beside the pool and spoke. "This is the mirror of truth," he said. "It shows what you are beneath the skin. You will step in, and it will judge you." Jackson took a breath, removed his shirt and stepped into the pool. The water was cold, but calm. He stood still, waiting, watching his reflection. Then something strange happened. The water began to glow, turning silver and blue. His reflection changed. He saw himself, but with golden eyes, a glowing chest, and strange marks on his arms. He gasped, but the water didn't stop. A voice whispered, not from outside, but inside his mind. "Do you accept the gift?" it asked. Jackson swallowed. "What gift?" "The gift of purpose," the voice said. "To protect, to guide, to carry light into darkness." He didn't answer right away. Then he looked at the stars, at Miari, standing outside the circle, hands over her heart, and he whispered, "Yes." The pool flashed. Blinding white light filled the stones. The villagers cried out and covered their eyes. When the light faded, Jackson stood there, dry and glowing. A mark shaped like a flame and river crossed his chest. The elder bowed deeply. "You are the blessed," he said. "The signs are clear." Miari ran forward and hugged him. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew you were more." But in the shadows beyond the stones, a pair of eyes watched, cold, jealous eyes. A figure turned and vanished into the woods, whispering, "If he is chosen, he must be tested harder." Jackson walked down the hill with the others, but he felt the weight of something new. He had answers now, but also more questions. He had been judged and accepted, but by who? And for what? The village was quiet the next morning. Too quiet. No children played in the fields, no merchants shouted in the streets. Even the birds seemed to stay silent in the trees. Jackson walked through the empty paths with a strange feeling. In his chest, it wasn't fear exactly, but something heavy, something waiting. He reached the elder's home, and the door was already open. Inside, candles burned low, casting soft shadows on the stone walls. The elder sat alone, his hands folded in his lap. He didn't look up when Jackson entered. Instead, he said in a soft voice, "They've come for you." Jackson's brow furrowed. "Who's they?" The elder finally looked at him, eyes tired but steady. "The guardians of the cave," he said. "Keepers of the ancient trial. They don't speak, they don't warn. They simply take." Before Jackson could ask another question, two tall figures appeared at the door. They wore black robes that shimmered like oil. Their faces were hidden behind masks carved from bone. They said nothing, just nodded once toward Jackson. He looked at the elder again. "Do I go with them?" The old man stood and placed a hand on Jackson's shoulder. "You already passed the mirror," he said, "but the cave is older. It listens to truth, not just light." Jackson nodded, and the guardians turned without a word. He followed them through the woods, past rivers and broken stones. They walked for hours without rest, until the trees thinned and the air grew colder. Finally, they reached a cliff. Below it yawned a dark crack in the ground, the entrance to the cave of silence. The guardians pointed to the opening, then stepped back. Jackson looked into the dark and took a deep breath. Then he stepped forward and disappeared into the shadows. Inside, the air was thick and heavy. No sound echoed in the cave, not even the scrape of his boots. His own breathing seemed stolen by the walls. It felt like walking through a dream made of stone. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Faint lights flickered along the walls, strange moss that glowed green and blue. Then he reached a large open chamber. There was nothing inside except a stone seat in the center. Jackson sat down slowly, and then the visions began. He saw himself on Earth, alone, walking empty streets after a battle he couldn't forget. He saw himself in space, drifting without purpose. Then he saw the girl Myri sinking into the river. Again and again, each time he reached, and each time he failed. He tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. The visions surrounded him, swirling, pulling at his mind. Then came a voice, not from outside, but from deep within him. "Why did you jump?" It asked. Jackson swallowed, because no one else would. "Wrong," the voice said. "Why did you jump?" He clenched his fists. "Because I couldn't let her die." "Still wrong," it whispered. Then came silence, long and deep. He sat there, heart racing, and then he whispered, "Because I didn't want to fail again." The silence broke like glass. Warmth spread through his chest. The air shifted, and the stone beneath him glowed. The voice returned, softer this time. "Now you speak truth." The cave walls lit up with ancient writing. Symbols danced across the stone like fireflies. The mark on Jackson's chest began to glow again. This time brighter, deeper, more alive. Then a figure stepped out from the wall shaped like light. And water, it had no face, no voice, but it reached out and touched Jackson's forehead. A rush of memories not his own flooded him. He saw great wars, falling stars, gods and mortals walking together, and he saw a promise made long ago. A human would come. One who saves not just with strength, but with heart. One who carries sorrow and turns it into light. The light faded, and the cave began to dim. Jackson stood slowly, his body shaking but whole. He turned back the way he came. And as he walked out of the darkness, he realized something. He was not the same man who entered. He had seen too much, felt too much, and deep inside, a voice still whispered, "You are ready." Outside the cave, the guardians waited. When they saw him, they bowed low. They did not speak, but they placed their hands over their hearts. Then they stepped aside and let him pass. The walk back was quiet, but the wind now felt different. Like it welcomed him as he reached the village edge. People came running. Miari was first, her small feet flying across the dirt. She hugged him tight and whispered, "You're back." Jackson smiled. "Yes," he said softly, "I'm back." But deep down, he knew something had changed. The trial hadn't just tested him, it had awakened something inside him. And whatever was coming next, he was no longer just a man. He was marked. He was chosen, and soon the world would know why. Jackson sat by the river where it all began. The water was calm now, flowing gently beneath the early light. Birds chirped softly in the trees, and flowers bloomed along the banks. But inside Jackson, his thoughts still moved like the stormy water he once dove into. The cave had changed him, the visions, the voice. The lights had all still echoed in his chest, and the mark across his skin glowed faintly in the sun. Hidden under his shirt, but never truly gone. Behind him, soft footsteps approached. He turned and saw Miari walking quietly, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She stopped beside him and sat down, folding her knees like a child does when they feel safe. "I brought you this," she said, offering the bundle. Jackson opened it slowly and found a carved wooden charm inside. It was shaped like a drop of water with a flame inside. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "I made it for you," she said, eyes bright. "So you don't forget who you are." Jackson smiled gently. "And who am I, Miari?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at the river, her face turning serious. Then she said, "You're not from here, but you were always meant to come." Jackson blinked, surprised by the words. "What do you mean?" "Saw you before," she said. "Before the river, before the storm, in my dreams." He listened, heart quiet. "In my dreams," Miari continued, "I saw a man made of light and ash. Walking through stars, he carried a blade, but also a flower. He was sad, but his sadness made him strong." Jackson looked at her carefully. "You saw me?" She nodded, and I heard a voice that said, "He will come when the river opens, and he will change the path of the sky." Jackson took a deep breath. Visions, prophecies, and now a child dreaming of him before they ever met. It was too much, but somehow it made sense. "There's something else," Mayari whispered, her voice low and trembling. Jackson leaned closer. "What is it?" She looked around to make sure no one was near. Then she lifted her sleeve and revealed a glowing symbol on her arm, exactly like his. Jackson's eyes widened. "When you pulled me from the river," she said, "I wasn't breathing, but I saw you, not just your face, but something inside you. And when I kissed your cheek, something passed from you to me." Jackson felt a chill down his spine. "You mean the mark?" She nodded. "But it's not just a mark," she said. "It's a key. A key to something buried long ago." She looked at the sky, eyes distant. "My parents don't know yet," she whispered, "but I've started hearing voices at night, not scary ones, kind voices, old voices. They tell me I must protect you." Jackson shook his head slowly. "I'm supposed to protect you, but we protect each other," she replied. "Us. That's what the bond is." He stared at her, unsure of what to say. She was just a child, but everything about her felt older, deeper, like water hiding beneath still ground. Just then, her father arrived, tall and strong, wearing his battle armor. He nodded at Jackson and placed a hand on Mayari's shoulder. "Come," he said softly. "It's time." Jackson stood too. "Time for what?" The general looked serious. "A meeting of the Star Council," he said. "They've called for you." Jackson frowned. "Why me?" "They heard what happened in the cave," the general replied, "and some fear what you might be." Jackson looked down at the charm in his hand, then at Mayari, who simply smiled. "You'll be fine," she said. "They're just afraid of what they don't understand." He walked with them to the village center, where a stone circle waited. Inside sat 7 figures in cloaks, each one representing a different race or family in the valley. They rose as Jackson entered, but their eyes were not warm. They were judging, measuring, afraid. One of them, an old woman with silver feathers for hair, spoke first. "You went into the cave," she said, "and came out marked." Another, a reptilian male, hissed, "That place has taken stronger men than you." "And yet," said a third, "he lives." The room fell quiet. Jackson stepped forward and said, "I didn't ask for this. I didn't come here to be chosen, or marked, or followed. I came to live quietly." "And yet you saved a child," said the feathered woman. "You faced the river," said the reptilian. "You passed the trial," said another. Jackson raised his voice slightly. "Then stop treating me like a threat," he said. "I'm not here to rule, I'm here to help." They looked at each other. Then the oldest among them said, "Very well, but help comes with a price." Jackson narrowed his eyes. "What price?" Before the elder could answer, a loud horn echoed through the air. Guards ran into the circle, shouting, "An airship has landed at the edge of the forest. They're not from this valley, outsiders." The council members stood quickly. The general reached for his weapon. Mayari grabbed Jackson's hand, her eyes wide. On the mark on both their arms began to glow again. Whatever was coming, it had already begun. Asterisk smoke rose in the distance. The skies, once peaceful, now churned with strange clouds. And from the edge of the forest came the sound of heavy footsteps, dozens of them, moving in unison. Armored and armed, Jackson stood near the stone council circle, Mayari at his side, her hand tight in his. The council members rushed into action, but their eyes held panic. Not confidence, they're outsiders. One shouted, "Not just traitors." Said another, "These are soldiers." The general moved fast, calling warriors to position. He turned to Jackson and said firmly, "Stay close to me." Jackson didn't argue. He could feel if the air had changed. The danger was real. Moments later, a loud hum filled the valley. An airship, black and sharp like a spear, pierced the clouds. It hovered low over the trees, casting a dark shadow on the village. Symbols painted across its hull glowed red, unfamiliar and threatening. Then, from the trees, they came, outsiders, tall and armored in silver suits, masks covering their faces. Their leader, a woman with one eye glowing green, stepped forward. She carried no weapon, but power radiated from her like heat. "I am Commander Nyxia," she said, her voice echoing through a speaker. "We are not here for your land." She paused, then her eye fixed on Jackson. "We are here for him." The villagers gasped. Mayari stepped in front of Jackson protectively, her mark glowing brighter now, visible even in the sunlight. "You cannot take him," said the elder. Stepping forward, "He is one of us now." Nyxia tilted her head. "That mark does not belong to you," she said coldly. "It belongs to the stars, and the stars gave it to our people first." The council murmured in confusion. Jackson took a step forward, his heart steady. "Why me?" he asked. "What do you want?" Nyxia's green eye narrowed. "You carry something old," she said. "Something buried for centuries. A key, a light, a piece of power that should have died long ago." Jackson glanced at Mayari. He remembered the visions in the cave. The old wars, the voices. "What if I don't want to go with you?" he asked. Nyxia smiled behind her mask. "Then we take the girl." In an instant, the village erupted. Warriors raised their weapons. Villagers rushed to protect their children. The general shouted to the walls. Jackson pulled Mayari behind him, eyes burning with anger. "You're not taking her," he said, his voice low and sharp. Nyxia raised her hand, and her troops aimed their rifles. But before they could fire, the ground shook, the sky cracked open with a sound like thunder, and a second ship, much older and larger, appeared above them. It glowed with golden light, ancient symbols spinning slowly across its hull. The outsiders backed away, confused and startled. Even Nyxia looked up in disbelief. From the second ship came a soft sound, a voice, clear and ancient, speaking in a forgotten language. Mayari's eyes went wide. "I know that voice," she whispered. "It's the one from my dreams." The golden ship sent down a beam of light. It landed between Jackson and Nyxia's forces. Inside the beam, a figure began to form, tall, graceful, and glowing with starlight. Everyone froze. Even the warriors lowered their weapons. The figure spoke, and though the words were strange, everyone understood. This man is bonded to the seer's daughter. It said, he has passed the trial of truth and carries the mark of balance. The figure turned to Nyxia. "You seek to take what does not belong to you." Nyxia clenched her jaw. "He's human," she said bitterly. "He doesn't belong anywhere." "I guess." But the figure shook its head. "He belongs to both sky and soil now. He is the bridge between the old and the new." Then it turned to Jackson. "Do you accept this path?" Jackson looked around at Mayari, at the village, at the people who had begun to trust him. Then he looked at the sky, and he nodded. "Yes," he said. "I accept." The beam of light flared for a moment, and the mark on Jackson's chest and Mayari's arm glowed in perfect sync. Nyxia took a step back. Her forces retreated slowly into the trees, but before she left, she looked at Jackson and whispered, "This isn't over." As the black ship disappeared into the clouds, the golden one hovered for a moment longer, then it too vanished, leaving behind only silence and sunlight. The villagers began to cheer. They gathered around Jackson and Mayari, hands raised, voices singing. The elder knelt, tears in his eyes. "You face the sky itself," he said, "and they listened to you." The general placed his hand on Jackson's shoulder. "You've become more than one of us now." Jackson looked at Mayari. She smiled and said, "You didn't just save me. You saved everyone." But even in the joy, Jackson knew something important. This was not the end. The storm had passed, The enemy had left for now, but the war written in stars had only just begun. Asterisk, the village stood quiet once more. But this silence was not heavy like before. It was peaceful, full of breath and warmth. A silence after battle, after fear, after change. The sky was clear, the sun bright, birds flew freely across the trees. And the river sparkled like glass. But for the people of the valley, everything felt different now. Something sacred had passed through them, and nothing would be the same. Jackson sat near the council fire. No longer a stranger, the villagers gathered around him, not to stare, but to listen. The elders sat close, the warriors leaned in, and the children crowded his feet. They waited not for a speech, but for a presence. His presence. Nyxia rested at his side, her small hand still in his. Her arm glowed faintly beneath her sleeve, the same as his chest. The bond between them was no longer questioned, it was truth, as real as the land beneath their feet. The elder stood and raised his staff. In our lifetimes, he said, we have seen many storms, but never one that ended with light falling from the sky. He turned to Jackson and bowed. You came from far away, carrying only your pain, but you gave us hope. And in return, we give you something greater. The general stepped forward next. He removed his ceremonial blade and placed it on the ground in front of Jackson. In our tradition, he said, this is the final act of acceptance. It means we no longer protect you, because now you protect us. Jackson looked at the blade, then at the faces around him. There was no fear in them now, only faith, and it shook him more than the river or the cave ever had. I'm not perfect, he said quietly. I'm just a man. Nyxia smiled and whispered, you're my man. The villagers chuckled softly. What? And Jackson's heart swelled. It was the first time in years he had truly felt at home. Later that night, a great fire was lit in the center of the village. Food was shared, drums were played, and songs old and new filled the air. Jackson sat near the flames, laughing as children danced around him. They tied ribbons around his wrists and called him the Firefather. Nyxia's mother approached with a gentle smile. She knelt and placed a golden cloth around Jackson's shoulders. In our house, she said, this means you are family. Her husband, the general, placed a hand on Jackson's back. You are not just our guest anymore, he said. You are our son. Jackson blinked, emotion rising in his throat. I don't know what to say, he murmured. Then say nothing. The elder replied from nearby, just live among us. Protect, teach, and grow. As the night deepened, the stars began to shine bright above. Jackson stepped away from the crowd and stood at the river's edge once more. The same river he had jumped into that stormy night. The same water that had almost taken Nyxia away. Now it flowed gently, quietly. At peace, he looked at his reflection and saw a man no longer lost, no longer broken by the past. He saw a protector, a teacher, a father. He heard footsteps, and Nyxia joined him. She leaned against him and whispered, do you think the stars will leave us alone now? Jackson smiled. Maybe, he said, or maybe they'll just keep watching. Nyxia giggled. Let them watch. She looked up at him, her eyes soft and glowing. You're not just my savior, Jackson, she said. You're my family. He crouched beside her, brushing her silver hair back gently. And you, he said, are the reason I'm still breathing. The next morning, Jackson woke to the sound of laughter. He opened his door to find villagers building something beside his cabin. Wood, stone cloth. They were building a school. The elder waved at him. You saved a child, he said. Now help us save more. Jackson stepped out with a smile. He helped carry beams, taught the children to read, and even told stories of Earth. He showed them maps, stars, languages, and the children loved every minute. He was no longer the outsider, no longer the silent man in the cabin. He was the human who dove into a raging river to save a girl. The man whose bravery lit up the night sky. The protector, the brother, the son. And as Mayari grew older, the bond between them never faded. She still held his hand when the wind howled. And he still looked at her like a miracle each day. The mark on their skin stayed bright. A sign not of power, but of love, trust, and second chances. And though rumors of other ships and distant dangers still came from time to time, the village stood strong, because now they had something more powerful than weapons or walls. They had each other, and in the center of it all was a man who once thought he was alone, but now was loved like a savior and cherished like family. Asterisk.